Most people think the history of money is the history of things: a shell, a coin, a piece of paper, a credit card, a number inside a banking app. That version is not wrong, but it is incomplete. It makes money look like an object that kept changing shape as society became more advanced. The deeper story is more important. Money did not become powerful because humans found better objects to trade with. Money became powerful because humans found better ways to record trust, force obligations, and control access to resources. That is the part most people miss. Money has always been connected to power, not in the loud, dramatic way people usually imagine, but in a quieter and more structural way. Whoever controls the record of value can influence who owns. Who owes, who gets credit, who pays interest, who survives a crisis, and who is forced to sell when the timing turns against them. A coin sitting in someone's hand looks simple. A banknote folded inside a wallet looks ordinary. A digital balance on a screen looks harmless. Yet behind every form of money is a system of authority. Someone issued it. Someone accepts it. Someone records it. Someone can create more of it. Someone can change the rules around it. Someone benefits when trust holds, and someone suffers when trust breaks. This is why money should never be understood only as a tool for buying things. Money is a social technology. It allows a society to measure value, settle debts, store purchasing power, and coordinate economic life between people who may never meet. It turns labor into wages, land into collateral, promises into contracts, and future income into something that can be priced today. Once you understand that, history of money starts to look different. You stop asking only what people used as money. You begin asking who controlled the system that made people trust it, the common story says. Money began because barter was inconvenient. A farmer had wheat. A shoemaker had shoes. The farmer wanted shoes, but the shoemaker did not want wheat. So eventually society invented money to make trade easier. There is some truth in that. Direct exchange is limited. If every transaction requires both people to want exactly what the other person has, trade becomes slow and fragile. But the barter story can make early money sound too simple, as if ancient people were just waiting for coins to appear so markets could become efficient. In many early economies, money was not primarily something people carried in their pockets. It was something people recorded before coins became common. Temples, palaces, merchants, and administrators needed to track grain, land, labor, taxes, rations, silver, and debt. They needed a way to measure who delivered what, who was owed, who had already been paid, and who still had an obligation. In that world, accounting was not a boring back-office function. Accounting was power. The ledger was the memory of the economy. If there is no reliable record, every transaction has to be settled immediately or remembered personally. That limits how far trust can travel. But once obligations are written down, time becomes financial. A worker can be paid later. A farmer can owe grain after harvest. A merchant can receive goods today and settle in silver at a future date. A promise can become measurable, and once it becomes measurable, it can be enforced. That is one of the oldest financial shifts in human history. Money made promises visible, and the moment promises became visible, they could be managed. They could be collected, transferred, taxed, forgiven, inflated away, secured with collateral, or used to control the person who made the promise. This is why debt appears so early in the story of money. Debt is often explained as borrowing. That definition is too small. Debt is a claim on the future. If you borrow grain, silver, or currency today, the lender receives some kind of claim on your future production, your future harvest, your future income, your future labor, your future choices. Used well, debt can help build something that would not exist otherwise. It can fund a farm before the harvest, a ship before the trade route, factory before the first sale, a home before the buyer has the full purchase price in cash. Debt allows future value to be pulled into the present, but debt also creates dependency when the future does not arrive as expected. That is why the real question is not whether debt is good or bad. The serious question is what the debt controls. If debt is attached to an asset that produces enough cash flow to service it, it may increase capacity. If debt is attached to consumption, status, or a fragile expectation of future income, it often transfers control away from the borrower. This lesson is ancient, and it is still ignored. A person can feel rich while using debt, because debt gives access before ownership is fully earned. But access is not the same as control. The car can be driven, the house can be occupied, the lifestyle can be displayed, and still the terms may belong to someone else. When conditions are easy, that difference stays hidden. When income falls, interest rates rise, or credit tightens, the truth becomes visible very quickly. Money reveals itself. Under pressure, the next major step was coinage. Coins changed the portability of trust. A piece of metal can have value because the metal itself is scarce or useful, but a coin is more than metal. A coin carries a stamp. That stamp says the weight, purity, ruler, city, or empire behind it can be recognized. It reduces the need for every person in every transaction to test the metal from the beginning. Standardization speeds up economic life. With coinage, value could move more easily across markets. Soldiers could be paid. Taxes could be collected. Trade could become more liquid. Cities and empires could extend their reach, because money could travel with a recognizable mark of authority. This is where the surface story and the deeper story separate again. On the surface, coins helped commerce. Beneath the surface, coins allowed rulers to place their authority inside everyday transactions. Every stamped coin carried a message about who had the right to define value. The symbol on the coin was not decoration. It was a reminder that money and political authority were now moving together. Once rulers controlled coinage, they also gained the ability to change it. One of the oldest forms of monetary manipulation is debasement. This happens when the precious metal content of a coin is reduced while the coin continues to circulate at the same face value. A ruler under pressure can stretch resources by issuing coins that look familiar but contain less metal than before at first. People may accept it. Habit and authority can carry the system for a while. But if the gap between the promise and the reality becomes too large, trust weakens. Prices adjust. People begin to prefer older coins, foreign coins, hard assets, or anything that feels less exposed to manipulation. That pattern never really disappeared. The form changed, but the tension remained. Money requires trust, and power is always tempted to spend that trust. A government, bank, ruler, or institution can use its credibility to create more claims than the system can comfortably support. For a while, this can look like strength. More spending, more credit, more expansion, more confidence. Then the hidden weakness begins to show. People do not lose trust all at once. They start by demanding a higher return, a safer asset, a shorter repayment period, or a different currency. The loss of confidence usually begins quietly before it becomes obvious. This is why money is never only about what is printed or stamped. It is about what people believe that object can command tomorrow. Paper money made this even clearer. Paper is an unusual form of wealth, because the material itself is almost worthless. Its value comes from the promise attached to it. In early forms, paper notes often represented a claim on something else. Gold, silver, deposits, or stored value inside a trusted institution. The note was not the final thing. It was a receipt, a claim, a promise that something stood behind it. That distinction matters. A receipt and the thing itself are not identical. If a warehouse holds 100 units of gold and issues 100 receipts, the structure is simple. If it issues more receipts than the gold it holds, a new financial reality appears. As long as everyone does not redeem at the same time, the system may function. The extra receipts create flexibility. They allow more transactions, more lending, more movement. But they also introduce fragility. If confidence breaks, and too many people ask for the underlying asset at once. The promise is tested. This logic sits close to the heart of banking. A bank is not just a safe place where money sleeps. A bank transforms time, risk, and trust. Depositors place money in the bank because they want safety and access. Borrowers come to the bank because they want capital before they have enough of their own. The bank stands between them. It promises depositors access, while lending part of the funds to borrowers for longer periods. This is useful because economies grow when capital can move from idle storage into productive use. A business can finance inventory. A family can buy a home. A developer can build before all the units are sold. A manufacturer can purchase equipment before the future. Revenue arrives. The danger is hidden in the timing. Banks often have short-term obligations and longer-term assets. Depositors may want their money back quickly, while loans may be repaid over years. This is known as maturity transformation. It is profitable and important, but it creates vulnerability. If too many depositors demand cash at once, the bank may have valuable assets but not enough immediate liquidity. That is how a bank can be strong on paper and still fail in real life. Timing can destroy what value? A loan cannot save. This is one of the most important lessons in finance. A household, business, bank, or government can own assets and still be trapped if the obligations come due before the cash arrives. The issue is not always whether something has value. Sometimes the issue is whether that value can be converted into usable money at the exact moment pressure appears. Control often belongs to the person who can survive the timing gap. This is why central banks became so important. A central bank sits at the center of the monetary system. Depending on the country, it may issue currency, manage reserves, influence interest rates, support the banking system, regulate parts of credit, and act during panic as a lender of last resort. That phrase sounds technical, but the idea is simple. When private trust breaks, the central bank can provide liquidity to stop panic from turning into collapse. The power to provide liquidity is not small. Liquidity is the ability to meet payments, convert assets into usable money, and keep the system functioning. During normal times, people barely think about it. During a crisis, liquidity becomes everything. A buyer with cash can dictate terms. A borrower needing refinancing loses leverage. A bank with access to emergency funding may survive, while another institution without that access may be forced into failure. This is why the institution that controls liquidity has enormous influence over the financial system. It does not need to own every asset. It only needs the power to decide how expensive money becomes, who can access funding, and how confidence is restored when fear spreads. Interest rates are one of the main ways this influence reaches the public. An interest rate is the price of time. It tells you what it costs to use money now and repay later. When interest rates are low, the future becomes cheaper to pull into the present. Homes look more affordable on monthly payments. Companies can borrow to expand. Investors may pay higher prices for assets because future cash flows appear more valuable when discounted at a lower rate. When rates rise, the opposite happens. Time becomes more expensive. Borrowers feel pressure. Weak projects are exposed. Assets that depended on cheap money reprice. Businesses that look strong in easy conditions discover that their strength was partly built on low financing costs. This is where many people misunderstand wealth. They look at the asset and forget the financing. Two investors can buy similar buildings and face completely different outcomes because their capital structures are different. One has patient equity, fixed-rate debt, strong reserves, and enough cash flow to handle vacancies or repairs. The other has expensive floating-rate debt, thin reserves, and an optimistic forecast. The building may look the same from the street, but financially these are different machines. Capital structure means the way an asset, business, or investment is financed. It includes the mix of debt and equity, the interest rate, the repayment schedule, the collateral, the covenants, the maturity date. and the consequences if cash flow weakens. This is why sophisticated investors care so much about terms. The asset matters. But the terms decide who stays in control when conditions change. A good asset with bad financing can become a problem. An ordinary asset with patient capital and steady cash flow can become durable. Wealth is rarely built by looking at price alone. It is built by understanding the relationship between price, cash flow, debt, time, and risk. That relationship runs through the entire history of money. As economies move from metal coins to paper notes, and from paper notes to bank deposits, money became more abstract. The more abstract money became, the more it depended on institutions. A gold coin can be weighed. A paper note must be trusted. A bank deposit must be honored. A digital balance must be protected by networks, laws, banks, and settlement systems most users never see. Modern money feels simple because the interface is simple. You tap a card. You send a transfer. You check an app. But beneath that simplicity is a deep machine of credit. Clearing, settlement, risk controls, identity checks, payment networks, central bank reserves, commercial banks. In legal enforcement, the customer experiences money as instant. The system experiences money as a chain of promises. That chain became more complex as the world moved through the age of gold standards. Central banks, global trade, war finance, and eventually the modern fiat system. A gold standard links money in some way to gold. The exact structure can vary, but the basic idea is that currency has a connection to a scarce physical commodity. Gold has always had psychological power because it is difficult to create, widely recognized, and outside the direct control of politicians. No government can print more gold by decree. That is why gold is often seen as discipline. But gold also creates constraints. If the money supply is tied too tightly to gold, the financial system can become rigid. A growing economy may need more liquidity than the gold supply allows. If gold leaves a country, credit can contract. If people fear convertibility will fail and rush to redeem, the system comes under pressure. During wars, depressions, and banking crises, governments often face difficult choice between defending the gold link and responding to economic emergency. History shows that when survival conflicts with convertibility, convertibility is vulnerable. This is not because gold is meaningless. It is because a monetary system must serve political, social, and financial needs at the same time. A system that looks disciplined in calm conditions can become too rigid under stress. Fiat money took the world into a different arrangement. Fiat money is not backed by a physical commodity like gold. It has value because the state declares it legal tender, accepts it for taxes, protects the legal system around it, and maintains enough credibility for people to keep using it. Its strength comes from trust in the overall system, the government, the central bank, the courts, the economy, the tax base, the military, the banking system, and the productive capacity behind the currency. Fiat money is flexible. That is its strength. Asterisk, it allows governments and central banks to respond to crisis, expand liquidity, support banking systems, and manage economic shocks without needing a fixed quantity of metal. But flexibility always requires discipline. If a system can create more money, the value of that money depends on whether people trust the judgment of those who control it. This is why fiat currency is not automatically worthless. As some people claim, it is also not automatically safe. It depends on the credibility of the system behind it. When credibility is strong, fiat money can support enormous economic complexity. When credibility weakens, people begin looking for protection. They may move into foreign currency, real estate, commodities, equities, gold, or anything they believe will hold value better than the currency. They are leaving behind. The lesson is not that one form of money is perfect. The lesson is that every form of money has a control problem: commodity. Money is constrained by the supply and movement of the commodity. Fiat money is constrained by credibility and discipline. Bank money is constrained by trust and liquidity. Credit money is constrained by repayment capacity. Digital money is constrained by infrastructure, security, access, and governance, there is no money without trade dash-offs. One of the most important modern turning points came after the Second World War. The global economy needed a new structure. The old system had been damaged by depression, war, competitive devaluations, debt, and political instability. At Bretton Woods in 1944, a new international monetary order was designed. The United States dollar became central. Other currencies were linked to the dollar, and the dollar was convertible into gold for foreign governments at a fixed rate. This placed the dollar at the center of global finance. That position gave the United States extraordinary influence. When a country issues the dominant reserve currency, its money becomes more than domestic money. Other nations hold it, trade with it, borrow in it, and use it as a reference point for value. The issuer can borrow in its own currency, develop deep financial markets, and place its government debt at the center of global reserves. But there is a built-in tension. The world needs enough reserve currency to trade, save, and settle international obligations. That means the issuer must supply its currency to the world. Yet supplying too much can weaken confidence in the promise behind it. This tension became harder to manage over time. In 1971, the United States suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold. That decision did not end money. It marked a deeper shift in what money had already become. The global system moved further away from metal and deeper into trust and state power. Financial markets, taxation, military strength, institutional credibility, and network effects. After that, the question was no longer whether a dollar could be exchanged for gold at a fixed rate by foreign governments. The question became whether the system behind the dollar remained strong enough for the world to keep using it. That is the modern monetary world. Money today is mostly digital. Most of what people use as money is not physical cash. It is bank deposits, electronic balances, credit lines, payment entries, and claims moving through institutions. The money feels real because it works. Employers pay in it. Banks lend in it. Stores accept it. Taxes are settled with it. Courts enforce contracts around it. The modern person rarely touches the base layer of the system. They live inside the user interface. This is why financial education often becomes shallow. People are taught how to budget, save, borrow, and invest, but rarely taught what money actually is inside the system. They know the balance in the account, but not the structure that makes the balance usable. In modern banking, lending can create deposits. When a bank approves a loan, the borrower receives a deposit, and the bank records a loan asset. The balance sheet expands. This does not mean banks can create money without limits. They face regulation, capital requirements, liquidity needs, risk controls, borrower demand, and central bank policy. But it does mean credit creation is deeply connected to money creation. When credit expands, economic activity can accelerate. Homes are purchased, businesses invest, asset prices rise, and confidence spreads. When credit contracts, the same mechanism works in reverse. Borrowing slows. Spending weakens. Banks become selective. Asset prices can fall. Projects that depended on easy money become difficult to finance. This is why crises often begin with leverage and end with liquidity. Leverage means using borrowed money or financial obligations to control a larger asset than your own capital would allow. It can be productive when cash flow, collateral, and repayment terms are strong. It becomes dangerous when the borrower depends on rising prices, easy refinancing, or conditions staying perfect. A mortgage is leverage. A business loan is leverage. A private equity deal is leverage. A government bond market is built around debt. Leverage is not automatically reckless. The question is whether the structure can survive stress. When asset prices rise, leverage makes people look smart. When cash flow falls, refinancing becomes expensive or buyers disappear. Leverage reveals who was actually fragile. This is where many people confuse price movement with wealth. During an expansion, rising prices create confidence. Confidence attracts more buyers. More buyers push prices higher. Higher prices make the story feel true. Eventually, people begin to believe the increase itself is proof of safety. That is how bubbles become emotionally convincing. The asset may have some value, but the price becomes dependent on belief, credit, and liquidity. As long as new buyers keep arriving and financing remains available, the system feels rational. When liquidity changes, the same crowd that made the asset feel safe can make it impossible to exit. People usually think they lost money because the price went down. That is only the visible part. Often they lost money because they misunderstood the game. They thought they were investing when they were speculating. They thought they owned durable value when they owned a story that required constant demand from the next buyer. Investing and speculation are not the same. Investing is the allocation of capital based on value, risk, cash flow, time horizon, and expected return. Speculation depends more heavily on price movement and the belief that someone else will pay more later. Speculation is not always foolish. Markets need people willing to take different views on the future. But confusing speculation with investing is dangerous because it hides the real source of return. If an asset produces no cash flow, has no clear valuation method, and depends mainly on future demand, the game is belief, timing, and liquidity. It may still rise. It may rise dramatically, but it should not be mistaken for a productive machine. The mistake is not always taking risk. The mistake is taking one kind of risk while telling yourself it is another. The same confusion happens with income. A high-income person can look wealthy and still have very little control. They may earn a large salary, live in a desirable area, drive an expensive car, and appear successful from the outside. But if the income stops and the lifestyle collapses within months, the financial structure was weaker than the image suggested. Income is money coming in. Control is the ability to make decisions without being forced by immediate financial pressure. Those are related, but they are not the same. Income can become control if it is converted into assets, reserves, skills, systems, or ownership. But if income is consumed as fast as it arrives, it only creates the appearance of progress. The person earns more, spends more, borrows more, and slowly becomes dependent on keeping the machine running at the same speed. That is why some people earn a lot and still feel trapped. Their money moves through their life, but little of it stays behind as durable power. The lifestyle absorbs the cash flow. The debt fixes their obligations. The assets they own may be mostly personal use, items that do not produce income. Their time is still tied to the need to earn every month. Now look at a different kind of person. They own a small service business that would never impress someone chasing status. Maybe it supplies parts, maintenance, logistics, or a boring but necessary industrial service. The office is plain. The branding is forgettable. Nobody is posting inspirational videos about it. But the business has repeat customers, steady margins, trained staff, and a service the market continues to need. Each month, it produces cash flow. The owner reinvests carefully. Systems improve. Managers take over more of the daily work. Equipment is purchased when the return makes sense. Debt is used cautiously, if at all, and only when the cash flow can carry it. That person may not look as wealthy as the high-income professional, but they may own something far more important, a productive system. This is where money starts becoming control. Not because the owner has a bigger balance on the screen, but because the money has been converted into a machine that produces future cash flow and reduces dependence on personal labor. That is the kind of distinction financial history keeps revealing. Wealth tends to concentrate around control of productive assets, credit systems, land, trade routes, institutions, legal rights, technology, and infrastructure. Cash matters because it gives flexibility. But cash alone is not the final form of wealth. If cash is never converted into something durable, it remains exposed to spending, inflation, fear, and poor decisions. Ownership is one way money becomes durable. But even ownership needs to be understood carefully. Owning something does not always controlling it in the way people imagine. A manager can run a company without owning it. A shareholder can own part of a company without having meaningful influence. A founder can own less of the economics while retaining control through voting rights. A lender can have no equity at all and still become powerful during distress if the loan agreements give them rights over assets, cash flow, or decisions. Finance becomes more serious when you understand that control can be hidden inside contracts. The simple world says the owner is in charge. The real world asks what kind of ownership, what class of shares, what debt agreements, what covenants, what board rights, what collateral, what regulatory limits. And what happens if performance weakens? During good times, these details feel technical. During bad times, they become decisive. This is why wealthy families, institutional investors, banks, private equity firms, and serious operators pay attention to structure. They know that the headline number is often less important than the rights attached to it. A person may say they own a business, but do they own the brand, the customer list, the building, the inventory, the intellectual property, and the cash flow? Or do they own a job with liabilities? A person may say they own real estate, but are they protected by fixed debt, adequate reserves, and sustainable rents? Or are they exposed to refinancing risk at the worst possible moment? The word ownership sounds simple until pressure tests it. Inflation is another example of money and control. Inflation means the purchasing power of money is falling as prices rise across the economy. People often discuss it as a single number, but the lived experience is different depending on your financial structure. Someone holding mostly cash can lose purchasing power. Someone with fixed-rate debt may repay in money that becomes worth less over time. A business with pricing power can pass rising costs to customers. A worker whose wages do not keep up becomes poorer in practical terms, even if the paycheck number rises slightly. An owner of scarce or productive assets may see nominal values increase, while a renter faces higher costs without owning the asset that benefits. Inflation is not only an economic condition. It changes the balance of control. It rewards some structures and punishes others. It can quietly transfer power away from savers if their money earns less than prices are rising. It can help certain debtors if their income rises while their payments remain fixed. It can pressure governments, households, and businesses in different ways depending on how their obligations are designed. This is why the structure matters more than the headline. A person asking whether inflation is good or bad is asking too broad of a question. The better question is good or bad for whom, under what balance sheet, with what kind of income, what kind of debt, and what kind of assets. Money is never experienced equally. The same economy can make one person feel squeezed and another person feel stronger. The difference is often not intelligence alone. It is position. What do you own? What do you owe? How is the debt priced? Can your income adjust? Do you have liquidity? Are your assets productive? Can you wait, or will you be forced to act? The person who can wait often controls the person who cannot. That may be one of the hardest financial truths. When markets fall, forced sellers create opportunities for patient capital. When credit tightens, those with liquidity can buy assets from those who must raise cash. When businesses struggle, the buyer with clean financing can negotiate better terms. When households live without reserves, even a small disruption can force expensive decisions. This is why financial freedom is not just about having a large number, it is about reducing the number of situations where you can be forced to sell at the wrong time, forced to borrow on bad terms, forced to accept work you do not want because every obligation depends on the next paycheck, forced to stay in a bad deal because you do not have the liquidity to leave, forced to panic because you confused price movement with safety. Money, used properly, reduces force. That is why the history of money matters for an individual viewer. It is not just an abstract story about ancient coins, gold standards, central banks, and banking systems. It is a story about the mechanics that still shape daily life. the rent payment, the mortgage rate, the business loan, the credit card balance, the currency in the bank account, the price of groceries, the value of assets, the ability to start a company, the ability to survive a bad year. All of these are connected to the same old questions. Who controls the claim? Who controls the timing? Who controls the terms? And who carries the risk when the system changes? Modern money hides these questions behind convenience. The app looks clean. The transaction is instant. The card works. The salary arrives. The subscription renews. The loan payment disappears automatically. The surface is designed to feel frictionless, but money has not become simple. It has become invisible. Settlement systems, banking reserves, credit creation, monetary policy, inflation, expectations, bond markets, payment networks, and legal structures are all working beneath the user experience. Most people never see the machinery, but they live with the consequences of its decisions. This is why financial literacy should go beyond budgeting tips. Budgeting is useful. Saving is useful. Avoiding reckless debt is useful. Investing early can be useful. But none of those ideas fully explain the system. They do not explain why $1 in a checking account behaves differently from $1 inside a productive business. They do not explain why the same asset can be safe for one buyer and dangerous for another. They do not explain why income can rise while freedom does not. $1 is not intelligent by itself. It takes the shape of the structure it enters. Spent on consumption, it becomes someone else's revenue. Held as cash, it becomes optionality, but remains exposed to inflation. Used as a down payment, it can control a larger asset. Invested into skills, it can increase future earning power. Placed into a weak opportunity, it becomes tuition. Allocated into a productive system with discipline, it can become future cash flow. The dollar is the same. The outcome is not. That is the real education. Money is not only accumulated, it is converted. The quality of your financial life depends on what you convert it into. Some people convert money into status. Some convert it into comfort. Some convert it into leverage they do not understand. Some convert it into assets. Some convert it into knowledge, relationships, ownership, and resilience. Over time, the conversions become visible. This is why the history of money and control ends in a very personal place. The world will keep changing the form of money. Currencies will become more digital. Payment systems will become faster. Banks will evolve. Central banks will experiment. Governments will regulate. New assets will appear. Old assets will be reinterpreted. People will argue about gold, fiat, crypto, debt, inflation, and monetary policy, but the deeper pattern will remain. Money will continue to represent claims on labor, assets, time, trust, and future production. The people who understand those claims will operate with more discipline than the people who only react to prices and balances. So, the point is not to become cynical about money. The point is to become precise. Ask better questions. Is this cash flow or only cash? Is this ownership or temporary access? Is this debt building capacity or buying appearance? Is this investment based on value, or am I depending on a future buyer with more enthusiasm than me? Does this asset produce anything? Can I survive if the timing turns against me? Do I understand the terms, or do I only like the story? These questions are not glamorous. That is why they matter. Most financial mistakes begin when the story feels better than the structure. A person feels wealthy because income is high, but the obligations are higher. An investor feels intelligent because the price is rising, but the return depends entirely on liquidity staying easy. A business owner feels in control because revenue is growing, but cash flow is weak and debt is short-term. A country feels powerful because the currency is trusted, but trust is being consumed faster than credibility is being rebuilt. History does not repeat perfectly, but it often reveals the same habits in new clothing. People overestimate the surface. They underestimate the ledger. They chase the object. They ignore the claim behind it. That is why money began as a record. And in many ways, it still is one. A record of who owes, who owns, who can wait, who must pay, who can borrow, who is trusted, and who has the authority to define settlement. The clay tablet and the banking app look nothing alike. But both carry claims. The coin and the central bank reserve are separated by centuries, but both depend on trust. The gold vault and the digital payment network belong to different eras, but both answer the same basic question. What will people accept as final value? The form keeps changing because technology changes. The control question does not. This is the part worth remembering. Money started as memory. It became metal, then paper, then credit, then policy, then digital infrastructure. Each stage made economic life faster and more flexible. But each stage also moved power toward the people and institutions that understood the new system first. The merchant who understood silver had an advantage over the person who only understood grain. The banker who understood deposits had an advantage over the person who only trusted coins. The investor who understood assets had an advantage over the person who only saved cash. The operator who understood cash flow had an advantage over the person who only chased income. Today, the advantage belongs to people who can see through the number on the preserve, screen and understand the structure behind it, because money by itself does not tell you enough. You have to ask what it controls. Does it control time? Does it control an asset? Does it control a claim on future cash flow? Does it give you flexibility? Does it reduce dependency? Does it protect you from being forced into bad decisions? If the answer is no, the money may only be passing through your life. If the answer is yes, then the money is being transformed into something stronger than spending power. That is the real lesson. The purpose of understanding money is not greed. It is sovereignty. The ability to make decisions from strength instead of pressure. The ability to survive uncertainty without surrendering your future. The ability to recognize when a financial opportunity is real and when it is only a story wearing the costume of wealth. For thousands of years, people have fought over coins, land, ledgers, debt, banks, currency, and credit. The objects changed, but the reasons stayed the same. Money is never only about money. It is about control. Control over resources, control over promises, control over time, control over the future. And once you see that, you stop looking at money as something to chase blindly. You start looking at it as something to understand, structure, and use with discipline. That is when money becomes more than a balance. It becomes a tool, and the person holding the tool finally begins to understand the machine around it.